Hello, welcome to the October 19th, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. We'll get started here in just a couple minutes. I'm going to do a quick audio test to make sure everything is coming through as expected. Bear with me just for a second. Hello, welcome to the October 19th. Okay, everything sounds kind of normal as expected on my monitoring computer. My name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. I'm based out of the United States in Alexandria, Virginia. And I'm an employee of Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products. And if you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you could just simply ask your questions in the chat field. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer them in a real-time manner will become impossible as we get more questions that come in. So I'll try to get through all the questions in chronological order, kind of as completely and succinctly as possible, so you get as many questions as possible. We'll try to go for about 4 hours today. So when asking questions, if you could indicate which version of Cubase that you're running, as well as if you could indicate which computer platform and operating system that is helpful information in helping to answer the questions. So if you could say I'm running Cubase Elements 10.5 on Windows 10, I'm running Cubase Pro on Mac Big Sur, that information, Cubase Pro 11 on Mac Big Sur OS, that information is often helpful. I may have some distractions towards the end of the live stream as my son comes home from school and he may want to just kind of pop in and say hi, or I may need to do something for him. And you may hear my wife who's working directly above me, so I'll apologize for any interruptions and we'll try to keep those minimized. A couple people just want to, and one other thing with questions, if you don't see an immediate response to your question, just know that we'll try to get to it in time. So if we could try to refrain from asking the same question repeatedly, because that will just kind of slow the whole process down. So a couple people I want to thank. So we will probably have later tonight, and it takes 3 or 4 hours to do, all of the topics covered in today's live stream. We'll have it pinned with timestamps to the top of the comments field, so you could easily reference and find different topics. And if you wanted to search for different topics that have been covered in previous live streams, Jan in Stockholm has been kind enough and generous enough to create a website called cubaseindex.com where you could search for questions. I think it's about 13,600 questions we covered in the last year and a half. And that will take you directly to the particular link in the discussion, so you could search there. We have another wonderful resource of information. In addition to all the great Steinberg information, is going to be the Cubase Nation Discord. And I know Jazz Dude does a lot of work compiling materials. Are very useful to our community, so thanks to him for that. And we have 2 people that will serve as moderators. So usually we have a very well-behaved crowd. Occasionally we'll have some spammer just promoting nefarious things. So I'd like to give a quick shout out to Jazz Dude and to Agent K for their help with that. So they're kind enough to volunteer their time. They're not official Steinberg employees. They're just kind of doing it to help the community. So kudos to them. All right, so let's go ahead and go through some of the questions. All right, so we see Jan is on. And also, if you're watching the live stream live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. But let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we have Jazz Dude, we have Jan from Cubase Index on, and we have Thermonuclear War from Serbia. Okay, so we have a question from David Griffiths. Hi, Greg, and all the usual gang. While holding down the mouse button plus dragging in MIDI notes in the drum editor, should the project quantize value change the note values too? or is it always 16ths? So let's go ahead and take a look. Let's say I will go ahead and just create a blank drum part here. I will take a look and open up the drum editor. Okay, and we'll maximize this. All right, so if I come here and if I want to draw in like a different rhythmic value, I think that once you're in the drum editor, the intention is that you could come over here and just kind of paint in different rhythmic values. So for each individual lane, so if I say, okay, here I wanted this hi-hat to be 30-second notes, that this would be kind of the basis for the rhythmic value as opposed to the global quantize. But let me see if I switch tools to maybe the drawing tool. Let's see if it's okay. So we see in the drum editor that we don't have the paintbrush tool. But I think the intention is not for it to follow globally here, but on each individual drum source, that we could just kind of paint in different rhythmic values here. So that's kind of one of the advantages of the drum editor. Now, if you're doing it from a key editor, so let's say if I just wanted to edit this particular part in the key editor, there is another tool that is not in the drum editor. But if you want it to come here to the key editor, and let's say we go to draw in notes, that there's a paint. So here you could just kind of paint notes in based on the quantize value. So now I could paint in quarter notes. So we could do that kind of using from the drawing tools. We could use the paint function there, but in the drum editor, it's going to be really intended that you would just, each different sound could have its own quantize value as you draw notes in, which could make more sense for drum parts. So it's not going to globally follow the quantize value. All right, so we have Chris checking in from Columbia, South Carolina. We have Uno checking in from Finland. Thanks for joining us. And we have Fred Robinson from Norwich in UK. I think I said it correctly this time. And we have Soren from Sweden. All right. We have John Costigan from Kenosha. We have Trans 2020 from Berkshire in the UK. I'm always afraid I'll get the wrong number of 20s when I say the name. All right, and we have Brian from Beulahville, North Carolina. All right, we see Taylor from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. It was great to talk to you last week, Taylor. Get you sorted out with your scoring questions. All right, so we see from Matt Elliston. Hi, Greg and everyone. Cubase Pro 11, Windows 10. I've got my MIDI keyboard in tune now, but is there a setting that would result in the note sounding on releasing the key as opposed to playing when pressed, please? Okay, so I'm just saying I've got my MIDI keyboard in tune now, so that's good. Is there a setting that would result in a note sounding on releasing the key as opposed to playing when pressed, please? So I wonder if it's maybe a sustain pedal that is, not working as expected. So like maybe the polarity is reversed on the sustain pedal. So if you have the option of doing that, but usually, so it sounds like maybe the keyboard is being inverted. I'm trying to think if there's, let's see if we go to a MIDI part here, if we could invert a note on message. I'm not sure if we can on the input. So it would be interesting, Matt, if you just come over here and hit Alt, I think it's Alt or Option K, and see if you get kind of the same behavior when you play like MIDI notes from your computer keyboard. This will open up an on-screen keyboard that can function. So see if you get the same behavior here. So, you know, if you have a sustain pedal, just out of curiosity, try hitting the sustain pedal and see if that makes a difference. But let's see if we go into the, so let's say if we activate, let's say if we want to transform, all right, so let me just see if I come here. And I'll just add a quick instrument, see if this may work. Okay, so just trying to think of anything that would cause your... Okay, so we can take the value. So I don't know a way to kind of switch it in software, but Matt, one thing that could be interesting is if you go to the MIDI inserts, go to MIDI monitor, and then see like as you hit a MIDI note, if you see like the MIDI note messages turn on or off. So let me know if you actually see, you know, from that, and you could see maybe what your controller is doing. I know that's a little strange type of a problem, but that may be able to lead you to a solution with that. Okay, so we see a question from the Cube, Cubase Pro 11. How do you use the beat designer to design endless beats? Don't you need to know the patterns to make them yourself? So if we wanted to, I'll just go to a different project here. So, you know, if you wanted, there are a number of different presets for beat designer. So if you're kind of using it maybe to start off as a sketched type of, you know, to be inspired, I'll just come over here. So let's say I'll come over here and we'll go to our MIDI inserts. All right, and let me just change the tempo. So now I could have, just when I open up a beat designer, and I'm just going to reread the question. How do you use the beat designer to design endless beats, but you don't know what the patterns to make them yourself? So, you know, once again, just kind of come over here and load up different presets. So if you say, okay, I just want to come here. And then at that point, you could just, you know, write a whole song, but just have, you know, beat designer, and then you could have, you know, different variations as well. Or just simply do your own. So, you know, you could do that. And then as you hit play, this pattern will just kind of loop in the background for you. So you don't necessarily have to, you know, be a drum programming genius. You could start off with something and then make your own variations using that. And, you know, if you wanted to at that point, you could go to this little star, this little triangle that points down. And at this point, you could, you know, shift left, right, you could reverse the beats. And at this point, you could also just, you know, insert the pattern at the cursor or at the left or right locator. So I could just say, okay, we're going to put that pattern right at our cursor position. And then you could just place that freely in your project. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, so we see Sir Robert checking in from Atlanta. Glad you can make it. All right, we have Aram, Paul Evans. Okay, so we have a question from Fred Robinson. Why did the pan knobs on VST Instruments Prolog and Spectre work the wrong way around? So let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so say... So I'm not sure if there's a particular reason. I would think that if you move to the right, that it would kind of do the opposite when you do that. So I can see where that does seem reversed. I don't really have a good answer, but I guess if you kind of know that it's reversed, I don't think there's any real preferences for that. So, but yeah, it appears that they are kind of reversed. So sorry about that. I wish I had a better answer. All right. Okay. Okay, so we have a question. One question maybe missed the last hangout. Many people use master bus chain till they mix. Compressor, EQ, clipper. Am I wrong? Because I mix all my time only with limiter because of gain staging. So, you know, some people, you know, and I know people that go back and forth. I think there's a lot of people that have like almost a mastering chain on their mix bus, and sometimes, you know, that they can make that work for them. But I tend to find that there's a lot of people that are making kind of critical mix decisions based upon what they're hearing from their mix bus, and it may not benefit the actual quality of their mix. So I think if, you know, like having what I personally do, and this is just my personal workflow, is I would tend to try to mix and make it sound great without having a huge mix bus processing chain. And then if you add that in, you know, if needed at the mastering stage, then, you know, I find that you tend to get better results with that. So, but at least for me, and it may be how I was kind of brought up to mix and how I've been working for a number of years, and maybe I've adopted my workflow to that. But I tend to think, you know, I see a lot of people that rely on, you know, mixing into their master chain as opposed to mixing for the particular song. So, all right, so we see Michael Pierce from the UK joining. So great to have you on. Thanks for being part of the live stream today. All right, so we see from Angelina Gargano. Hi, Greg. You are awesome. Thank you. Hope to be helpful. How can I add all my user presets, effects presets, user instruments back into back to Cubase 11.041 after a complete rebuild of computer. I have all the backup files. So if you came over here, if you backed up by going to the profile manager and exporting a profile, you could just simply import that particular profile. If you have gone through and let's say or if you have all the files kind of backed up, let's say if we go here to your library, and this is different. So if you're on Windows, you may click here to go to like your start menu or the start globe. And then you'd see all your programs, and then you'll see application. You go to Cubase, your Cubase program group, but don't launch Cubase, but right below where you would launch the Cubase program from the start menu, you'll see application data folder. And then you could just kind of copy those files there. On the Mac, if you go to your library folder, and then go to preferences. And then if you scroll down to Cubase, so let's say we have Cubase 11, and you would see a folder for presets that you could copy all of the presets from your older version. If you backed it up manually this way, you could then just copy the presets into the presets location in your library to preferences on Mac, or in your roaming file, your application data support. And then next time you start up, everything should automatically all your presets should be available and ready to use. All right, so the Cube is checking in from Melbourne, Florida. It's a beautiful part of the country. And we have Music All Day from Ypsilanti, Michigan. And Paul Evans from Ontario. Thanks for joining. All right, so we see David Griffiths, that the answer for the snapping in the drum machine on individual lane did the trick, so great. Okay, so we see in tempo track, I need to change the time signature. It's not letting me to change it anywhere I want. It's letting only with the snap. Is there any way to change the snap option? So let's say if so let's come over here. Let's see if we have a tempo track in this project. So, all right, so let's say, okay, so I'll just come right over here. Okay, so we have our tempo track, and let's go ahead and look at this in the tempo editor. Okay, so let's see if we come over here, and let's say at this point, if I want to put in like a different meter change, I'm just going to take the snap off. And let's see if we just all right, so let's see if we do it from a signature track, if that makes a difference. So you can see where the tempo change should be, or the meter change would be at the beginning of a measure. But let's say if I just wanted it to, so if you want it like in between, let me just see if we could adjust it maybe in the project browser. I mean, so I see that where it does make sense that it will do a signature change only and snap it to the bar because you are defining the signature change by the bar. So I think that makes kind of sense to have that, but so I'm not sure if if you're doing it based on meter, you would need to change, it would have to go through a fully defined meter before allowing you to do the tempo change. So I think that does make sense, but let me know if there's a particular use case that you need to do. All right, so we have Cedric checking in. Thanks for being able to join it. All right, so we see Michael Pierce is saying the Spectral Layers stream on Saturday was great, really interesting. Got a proper Club Cubase invasion too, so that's great. And on Thursday, starting at 4 p.m. U.S. Eastern, so like 3 hours after we usually do this, there will be a Lee Riley will be doing kind of a Nuendo specific live stream. So they're going to be starting up that. So check out that live stream as well. All right, so we see that Pablo has made the live stream. So that's wonderful. All right, and we see Kai Wen Franklin is back. So we haven't seen him in a while. So welcome back. And we have Dan Friedman from Atlanta. Okay, so we have a question from Ted Springman. Great to see you on the live stream. Couldn't you overcome drumming limitations of MIDI resolution by recording it very slowly into Cubase, print to audio slow, then stretch back up to normal speed? Or would quality suffer too much? I don't think you will have, being that the MIDI, when we go to like a particular MIDI event, so, we could have, so I think you're going to be better to always kind of do it in the MIDI domain. And some people think, oh, MIDI has a particular resolution, but, if I come here, I could actually switch this to sample level. So all the MIDI timing inside of Cubase is based on the sample. So if you wanted to adjust the, so there really isn't like a particular, like 480 ppq or 960 ppq that some people would kind of, have issues with, saying it wasn't kind of in between. So all of the MIDI data here is actually, can go down to the sample level. So Cubase was, I think, like one of the first DAWs that would allow you to do that. So it wasn't based on, and we could choose to have the MIDI that's at sample resolution displayed and be edited and aligned to the grid of various resolutions. So I think that you would get more artifacts kind of, recording it as audio and speeding it up, but you can, go down to the sample level for MIDI. So all you have to do is just kind of right click And we can now input things in bars and beats, in seconds, milliseconds, samples or time code. So, you go down to 1/192,000th of a second in Cubase. And if you're in Nuendo, 1/384,000th of a second. So that would be a much higher resolution. So that I don't think you'd have any concerns about the resolution of that. Okay, so we have a question. Hey, Greg, joining from Nairobi. It's from Mark Kiambo. Is there a way to record MIDI using a MIDI controller and have the notes appear in a piano roll as you play rather than have them appear after playing? So let's say I wanted to come to this little electric piano, and let's say I'm in the piano roll here. So a lot of times I'll get this question that, okay, I'm here and I want to record MIDI. Then when I stop, that the MIDI notes appear. So I'll just do this one more time. So now I'm going to stop. And then once I stop, the MIDI notes, if I hit record this time, that would be helpful. So let's just say, okay. So, as we do this, so all you have to do to get the MIDI notes to appear, so let's say if we're here and I just want to record and see it in the editor in real time. So if I'm in the editor, you just click on this little icon here, and then as you play, so you'll see this record in editor option. So as I come here, let's just go ahead and so once that is enabled, I could just come right over here and record and then it will appear. So all you had to do is enable the record in editor option. And once you have that done, then your MIDI notes will appear as you record in the piano roll. All right, wonderful to see Mandy Lanes made the live stream. So we just see, when is Cubase 11.5 coming? So usually they don't announce things until kind of it's ready for release. So we'll just have to kind of wait, and my usual cheeky answer is to say, it'll be coming when it's ready. So, but there's a lot of people always working hard on different products at Steinberg constantly. So I can't really say. Okay, so we see from Dan Freeman, question. I record in the box and I'm debating getting pedals for recording keyboards. I'd also like to have a MIDI board to customize. So let's see. I'd also like to have a MIDI board to customize things like a volume pedal or other user or other effects parameters, recommendations. So there's a lot of elements that can be controlled, so if you're looking for kind of like stomp effects, so, I mean, you could obviously just record the audio output, from the MIDI keyboard, through pedals, and like a volume pedal, and just, record that as audio. What I see a lot of people will do in different scenarios is set up a scenario. Let's say if we're doing a new track, and I want to come over here. So, we could record a MIDI track simultaneously with an audio track. So if you have the audio output of the keyboard connected. So really all you'd have to do at this point is, just say this is going to be, so you could record MIDI and audio simultaneously. I think a lot of times, you may find that if you go to like inserts, if you're looking for like typical pedals, a lot of the plugins that you get may kind of offer you better choices. And if you're looking for more typical guitar pedals, that we could come over here. If you go to the Vst Amp Rack, and let's say, okay, we choose not to have an amplifier. So let's say, if I come here, we'll say no amplifier and no cabinet, but you could now just come over here and start using, different effects. So you can say, okay, I want a chorus, I want to come here and that to go into an octaver and into a delay. So, we could just kind of get all of your pedals here. So that's a pretty easy way to kind of incorporate pedals. But, if you record the MIDI information from the keyboard, you could have all of the MIDI data and just record audio simultaneously. That you could kind of, if you're having kind of like real-time interaction with the keyboard, you could just, capture it both kind of at the same time. So that's a pretty good combination. But I think, sometimes when you use kind of older keyboards, that it could be, or older effects, that sometimes, you could get great results kind of in the box. All right, just responding to a quick question that was. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. See, Jeff Sabelski just mentioning never opened MIDI monitor yet. I like it. So it's good for like different, different scenarios for troubleshooting, especially if your controller is acting up. We see Mandy Lane indicating Cubase just gets better with time, every new version. Okay, so we see from Kai Wen Franklin, just saying his question is, please tell me the next version of Cubase will not require USB key for security. I think I will need a new one soon. Current key held together by tape. So the Steinberg has announced that they will be migrating away from the USB e-licenser. So we'll have to wait for, so we'll see if it's going to be in the next version. I assume it will be, but we'll have to wait for announcements, and hopefully they'll kind of share some more information. And we see Midnight Wind bring up a good point about the keyboard from, I think, Matt Elliston's, says sometimes the patch can be set to act upon key up. So yeah, some patches will, play one sound with key down, and you do a key release. At that point, you'll get a different note. So like a lot of patches in Backbone will do that for the impacts, and you can set that up in Halion. Yeah, so you just see from Itchback says, I think some sustain pedals have a polarity switch on them somewhere. So yeah, there's kind of two different schools of thought with sustain pedals, and they kind of fall into, one way to think about it is you have the Yamaha and the Roland school. So I think Roland and Chord use the same polarity, and Kawai and Yamaha used the same polarity, and often you could get a sustain pedal with a little switch that you could kind of switch, and sometimes your controller will automatically sense the polarity that's being done. Okay, so we have a question from Cedric. Been facing this problem since yesterday when I used DAW remote on the montage. My transport buttons have begun to play a drum voice. Funny, but it's happening. Any idea why? So usually when you're using your keyboard, Cedric, as a control surface, what you want to do is go to your studio menu to studio setup, because you know what the montage is actually transmitting is a MIDI note message in itself. So if we come here to the MIDI port setup, probably for the montage MIDI port, you'll see in all MIDI inputs, and what you want to do is to just uncheck in all MIDI inputs. And then once you do that, your montage, that port that's being used for the control will not kind of send the MIDI notes to the active track. So once again, go to studio setup, select MIDI port setup, and uncheck in all MIDI input ports. And then that should take care of it for you, Cedric. Okay, so you just see from Dan Freeman, says my YouTube is supposed to use the best resolution of the source. I've noticed the live stream's resolution changes, but I always have to manually change it to 1080 to see clearly. Anyone else notice that? So generally, I think the resolution that you watch could be based upon what YouTube deems as the optimum resolution for your data connection speed. So, you know, and sometimes it may be limited during the live portion. But I think, you know, as soon as it's streaming afterwards, everything should be done at 1080p resolution. But I think YouTube can change it. That's kind of optimized for what it deems is the best resolution for a live event, you know, at your data connection speed. All right. Okay, so we have a question from John Costigan. Hello, Greg. Hope all your family's well. We're doing great. Thanks for asking. I heard an effect I liked: long piano notes with quarter note repeats. Each repeat plays less and less of the original note attacks. Suggestions. It sounds kind of like a typical delay. So let's say if we'll just do a new project here. Okay, so let's say I just have and I'll just do this quickly, so with a chord track. Okay, so I'll just take this little chord progression here and we'll just drag it here. So let's say we'll just play these as whole notes. Okay, and at this point, I'll just put on an effect. So let's say I'll just select this. We'll go to our send effects. And we'll put a simple delay on. And we'll set this to quarter note delays. And we'll just set kind of our feedback down. So that's one quick way of being able to get that set up. So let me know if that's kind of what you're hearing, John. And if not, we will come up with another way of doing it. Okay, so we just see how to pitch bend audio files. So anytime that you have an audio file, if you wanted to do like with a particular pitch bend, you could take anything that you want, and because generally audio doesn't respond to MIDI, but if we go into maybe like a sample track, so let's say if I come here and I take an audio file, so let's say if I just have an audio file and I drag it down to a sampler track, I could play the sampler track and I could set the pitch bend range here. So, so let's say, okay, I just wanted to, we'll play.
No time to hesitate, it's all been done.
So now I'll
you
move.
You wanna have it, you can get enough. No time to hesitate, it's all been done. You wanna have it, you can get enough.
So I could just kind of draw in pitch bend.
Going, baby. Let's make it work. Just get it on.
And if I want to set the pitch bend range higher, I could just come here and say, okay, let's make it go perfect fifth. So as we play.
No time to hesitate, it's all been done.
And I can keep the same speed.
You can get enough.
So just take any audio file, and we could just say, okay, I just want this audio file to be in a sampler track. And then, so, once we had the sampler track, I could drag the audio file in. And we could also just have this in audio warp, so it'll play back the same tempo. So just, go to the sampler track and drag it in, and then you could use pitch bend directly there. Otherwise, you could, just come over here and say, okay, I want to take this particular pitch bend. We could go, if you want to do it in more of an offline mode, we could go to processes. And at this point, we could just say, okay, we're going to pitch shift. And I want to pitch shift this down, and we could even put in like a pitch shift envelope. So you can say, okay, I want it to go a perfect fifth up to a perfect fifth below. So I could now just come over here, and as we would play back this audio file, so you could do offline stuff as well. But if you wanted to kind of play it with the pitch bend, just drop it into a sampler track, and then you can just set the pitch bend range in the lower left-hand corner, and play one note to trigger the sample, and then just kind of move your pitch bend wheel, and it'll respond very easily. All right, so we see Matt Elder, and we had some discussion on the live stream on Friday. Just wanted to update, I changed my mouse to the Logitech MX3, and now the EQ works fantastic. Also, hanged my HD to not sleep. Didn't know about this option. Thanks all. So great, I'm glad that everything is working better. So congratulations on getting your new mouse. All right, so it's an email from composer Alan Silvestri, just come across my desk, so I'll reach out to him after. So he just got back from London doing Back to the Future musical. Looking forward to seeing that. So just see from the Cube, but I mean, I like it. Does it not have house, drum and bass, etc. saved as presets like in Groove Agent? But just curious if Beat Designer is even that functional. So yeah, you could do quite a bit with Beat Designer. So let's say if I was just starting off and wanted to just program something in Beat Designer, it's pretty straightforward, and you could obviously program some great beats in it. It's been used on many hit records. So, so let's say if I just wanted to come here to Beat Designer, let's say if, you know, I just wanted to program something from scratch, you know, I could just come over here and just mute that. Okay, so say we'll open up our Beat Designer. And let's say if I just wanted to come here and adjust the velocity of particular notes, we could select different kits here. So I say, okay, let's just throw in some hi-hats. Say hi-hat more. And then we just take off the tempo track here. So let's say, okay, we'll do like 100 beats a minute. And you could adjust kind of the velocity. And let's say I want to put it like flams. And if I want to put on different swings, and then if you wanted to even come over here and just say, okay, you know, I could shift left. Or even come over here and just reverse the pattern to get some different variations on it. So you could definitely, you know, come up with, you know, beats very easily using, and then if you wanted to have different beats that are assigned to different keys that you could then play, you could do that very easily using kind of the Beat Designer MIDI plugin. Okay, so I just see a question. Is it possible to join two consecutive MIDI notes like a pitch bend, portamento, glide in editing? So often that really depends, you know, so if you have two MIDI notes, they're going to be two different MIDI notes. So there isn't a way to, you know, if they're of different pitches, there isn't necessarily a way to join those MIDI notes together. But often when you do like portamento, it really depends on the instrument. So let's say if I'm here, so let's say if I just, you know, draw in two notes, you know, so if the instrument responds to portamento, you could just kind of go directly in. If you wanted to, you know, if you know the pitch bend range, you could choose to, you know, have the notes. So let's say, okay, we have our pitch bend. If I wanted to go from C3 to D3, I could just come here and draw in MIDI pitch bend, and we could have this kind of automatically snap. So I could say, okay, as I want this to draw in pitch bend, I could just come right here to this instrument. I think this will default to, you know, to 2 semitones, but let's say if we're playing, but you know, it's going to, you know, just play back that pitch. But you know, so if you wanted to kind of transition, you could do that. But a lot of times it's going to be up to the instrument of how it does it. So if I wanted to go to, let's say, like our sampler track, the sampler track itself as an instrument has different glide modes, so that, you know, if I wanted to play back, so let's say as I'm playing, I could set this to be in monophonic mode. So a lot of times you would need it to be in monophonic mode. So now we could set how long the glide takes just right here. So in the pitch section. So if you want to just go. But you could also put this into kind of a legato mode. So I could have this sample continue to play. And if I hold down the first note, you could just simply do different glides like that. So often it's going to be a function of the instrument that you're playing back, but you could draw in pitch bend, or, you know, use different instruments, like one of the included instruments, like the sampler track. All right, so we have Evans, the band, checking in from Portland, Oregon. So thanks for joining us. And in Teaneck, New Jersey, checking in. Okay, so we see Pulse Bass just saying, wow, didn't know there was this channel. Definitely subscribe. So yeah, if you've, you know, anytime learn a new tip or trick, or just kind of like what you're seeing with the community, make sure that you actually hit the like button and that you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. We see Fred Robinson just saying, yeah, I felt the same way when I found it too. All right. All right, so we see question from Dan Freeman. When you finalize your mix without Master Effects, what do you use to gain stage to 0? You know, I try to, you know, build up the mix as closely as you can. You know, so, you know, while you're doing it, it's easy to do if you have multiple tracks, so you don't necessarily have to use Master Effects to do that. And a lot of times, you know, I still will take, you know, if I'm doing something for release, I'll take it into Wavelab, especially if it's going to be like an album where I want to have consistency from track to track. If you're working on single things, I still often, you know, and it's just because I've done it for years, we'll take it into Wavelab and maybe have a different perspective and different metering and listen to it in a different environment with different workflows and be able to you know, do that work within Wavelab. But, you know, you could definitely, you know, easily get the gain up without having to use lots of, you know, without having to use lots of, you know, master processing. Okay. Okay, reading through some comments. All right, so we have Donnie Tarbert checking in from the UK. Thanks for joining. Okay, so just seeing from Kai Wen Franklin, Greg, it'd be cool if Beat Designer and Groove Agent merged. So how? So the thing that is appealing to many about Beat Designer is it's not tied to any particular instrument. Now, if we have the full version of Groove Agent, so let's say if we go to the full Groove Agent version here. You can program directly within the full Groove Agent. So let's just go ahead and load up just kind of a kit here. See if this one has patterns. Okay, so now that I'm, in this, I could just say, okay, let's come over here to our patterns. And then, at this point, you could just say, okay, I want to see my MIDI pattern. So you could program, directly beats into the full version of Groove Agent. So this isn't in the Groove Agent SE, but again, I think it's cool to have a tool that's not necessarily designed only, for Beat Designer type of function, is not limited to being only in like working with one particular source, but you could use that and just, flip to different drum sources to get, interesting, unexpected results that could work really well in your project. So, but if you wanted to do programming, if you had the full version of Groove Agent, you have that capability. Okay, so we see question. My keyboard player sent me some MIDI files. How do I open them up to preview them in Cubase 11? So really all you have to do is go to File to import MIDI file. So, and once you do that, something to be aware of, it may automatically load up like Halion Sonic SE for you. So if it was intended to be like a general MIDI file, you could do that. But if you don't, if you want it, if you kind of know what sounds they are, and if you wanted to change it to other instruments quickly, so when we go to your preferences, go to MIDI, and you'll see MIDI file, and then you'll see under destination, you could just say import it to instrument tracks. Otherwise, it may by default load it up and play all the sounds back through Halion Sonic SE. So just be aware of that. So we see from the cube just saying Greg is the coolest dude ever. Nothing phases him. No headaches. So I'm just glad to be able to help and share knowledge. So. Okay, so we have a question. If you gig live with backing tracks, would you use the project tracks or convert all to stems and play them? So it could really depend. I know some people that will have, let's say they'll have maybe the multi-tracks because, it could be, and I've seen this several times, where all of a sudden they get to a particular room and it's like, oh, that kick is not working in this room at all, and maybe I want to EQ just a kick drum, instead of having all of the drum sounds. So I think if it's kind of just playing back audio files that you're usually, it's not so CPU intensive. So I would say, if you had the ability to, take your projects and load them up, kind of like, say, okay, we have song 1, song 2, song 3. And then if you need to, like every room could sound different. Some may have way too much low end. Some may not have enough low end. May just disappear, so that you could tweak it if necessary. I think a lot of people may kind of get it set up, and within the PA, they may be able to EQ it. But sometimes if you're doing it by yourself and you're just, I've seen plenty of acts where everything is being mixed internally in Cubase live with backing tracks, and they send a stereo out to the front of house so that if it's, a house engineer, they know exactly, all they have to do is kind of amplify the pre-done mix, and they may choose to have the flexibility of, coming here and saying, oh, there's way too much low end on this particular track, so let's just come over here and drop that and fix the problem so that you're not taking away, you could fix the problem in a kick, but not necessarily affect the EQ of every single track. So it depends how much control that you need to have for your particular situation. So. Okay, so just see from Jeff Zabelski. So thanks for joining the live stream. Jeff's from Chico, California. The question is, have 3 HS3 tracks using Chord Track, one more HS3 for a written key editor part. Thought I ruined everything, but monitor button was on. How to keep clean track out of the Chord Track. Traps ticks. All right, so if you come over here, let me see if I could recreate this quickly. Okay, so I'll just kind of create a chord track. Okay, and I'll just create Hallian Sonic SE tracks here. Okay, so let's say I have 3 Hallian Sonic tracks, and let's say we have these all kind of set to monitor, and we could use this as use monitored tracks. So let's say okay, so let's say we have that. All right, so all right, so I'll just reread the question. So thought I ruined everything, but monitor button was on. How to keep clean track out of the chord track, tips and tricks. So one thing that you could do if you don't want the chord track to monitor through everything, so if you have that set, you could just mute the chord track, and then I think as we do this, it's not going to sound anything. So a lot of times I may just kind of use the chord track, or sometimes I'll just have a separate instrument for just monitoring that I could turn off and on. So, it could be like a pad or a piano sound. But, if you don't want to hear the chord track, try just muting the chord track, and then it won't kind of monitor through the chord track. So let me know if I'm misunderstood. All right, so we see from Jeff Sabelski says, Nuendo live stream, yes, Spectral Layers was cool. So you haven't had a chance to watch the Spectral Layers one. I may have it on Thursday. All right. Okay, so we have a question. Can you explain the difference between using the VCA track versus the group track? Okay. All right, so the first thing is a Vca track doesn't actually sum the audio. So if I wanted to process different things on a Vca track, let me just pull up another project where I have a bunch of automation. See if it's still in my recent projects. Okay, I'll just open it up. Okay, so let's say I have automation going on, let's say on my drums here. So we're looking at my drum track and I have existing automation already. So now, and let's say on my snare, I wanted to have more reverb. All right, I'm just make the reverb really obnoxious here. Okay, so now if I took all of my drums and assigned them to a group, so let's say I'm here. And now I will add a group track to these. All right, so now all these can be going. Let me just undo that. And I'm going to select all my drum tracks again here. And then I'm just going to add my group channel to the selected tracks. All right, so now let's say I bring, like I still hear the effects when I bring the group down. All right, so, but with a group channel, I can now come over here and I can process all of my drums together. But, you know, as you saw, like when I come over here and I have automation, you know, if I bring this down, it could affect the gain structure of what's going on in the particular tracks. So I will come over here and now select these and send these to a VCA. So now I'll select all my drum tracks and we'll send this particular group to a VCA folder. So I'm going to say to a VCA fader. So I'm going to add a VCA fader to the selected channels. So these will all be linked together. And let me just, I'll just reroute this quickly all to my stereo out since I orphaned its routing here. Okay, so now I will come over here. we're going to send these all to my VCA, to the selected channels. So now when I bring this down, one is we hear that it doesn't affect the gain staging between the effect sends and the track. So as I bring this down and I'll solo the snare, we have the same amount of reverb going into the snare, regardless of the volume. So let's say now, so that's a big thing why people use VCAs, because they could adjust the volume of a group without affecting all the gain staging of their effect sends. So as I do this also, let's say I write automation. So if we look at, we're gonna have automation here kind of going in contrary motion, where some tracks are going up and some are going down. So I'm gonna automate my VCA fader. So as I bring this down, you notice the tracks will still be going in contrary motion and going upward. And now when I bring it up, some of the tracks will still be going down, but their attenuation, their automation can be attenuated. So if I look at my tracks here, let's blow one of these up, we could see that we're gonna have the actual automation, and this is the automation as attenuated by the VCA fader. So if I wanted to kind of coalesce those two, all I'd have to do is, as we do this, I could just say combine the VCA fader and linked channels, and then we could have the automation of the VCA fader coalesce with the effects of that VCA fader on existing automation. So once I do that, then you can see all the tracks will go down. And the automation, so if you have existing automation and you wanted to just kind of do little bump ups and downs of groups, that's where VCA faders can really shine. And if you wanted to be able to, do a group compression, that's when groups can make more sense. Okay, so we see one more question about Beat Designer. Does it have bass and drum presets? So yeah, there's a lot of different presets that are available for it. So let's say I just add quick instrument channel. So as soon as you come over here, so there will be bass and drum presets, but it's not necessarily for bass stuff, but you could obviously do that. So if you wanted to look at some of the different presets, so when you click here, you could just load presets, and each of these will have multiple presets spread across different keys as well. So each of these presets could be like, an additional 13 presets with variations. So lots of great stuff to work with and be able to kind of modify as needed. All right, so we have Seiko checking in from Montreal. Thanks for joining the live stream. All right, so we see Kaiwen Franklin is back in the office now. All right, so according to Brian, I'm a wizard. So I'm an Oompa Loompa in a world of Willy Wonkas. All right. So we see from Thermonuclear War, it just says new plugins are illness. I wish I could just have some of it, but I must wait. But yes, I'm a mastering nerd, so yeah, that's great. Okay, so I just see from Sven Isaacson, is it possible to change the values while keeping their interrelation? Is it possible to do the same things on a mapped non-static tempo track? So let's say if I have my automation here, I'm just going to select, let's say, my automation points here. So I'll just kind of go from the bottom. And if I want it, so I'm not sure if this is what you want to do, Sven, but if you want to just kind of adjust their levels down, you could just do it like so. So if you wanted to kind of compress the contents, you could do that. If you wanted to just lower, if you just go to the value here, you could say, okay, I want the same automation, but down by, up by 3 dB or down by 6 dB. So you could do that. So you could also compress or expand the values between them. But if you just wanted to increase or decrease, you could just go straight from the center. And this will also work for tempo tracks as well. So let's say if I come to my tempo track, I could select the values here and just bring all the tempos up or down. And we could just select a region and from the info line be able to increase or decrease them like so. And the same exact functionality for tempo data or automations. Let me know if that is what you wanted to accomplish, Sven. Okay, so we see from the cube, and if Beat Designer has presets, how do you change all those patterns into a full song, for example? Let's say if we have our Beat Designer, so let's just say, Beat Designer will automatically synchronize to the project tempo. So let's say I come over here, I load a preset and double click. So let's say we have this as a preset. So at this point, this could automatically play, but if I move, let's say, okay, just right here to measure 2, and I could go to the Beat Designer. I could, on the selected track, I could just say insert pattern at the left locator, insert it at cursor, so I could just say, let's insert pattern at the cursor, and that would automatically just drag and drop it right into our project timeline. Okay, so we see from Mark, thanks, Greg, for the tip on record in editor. Great. I'm glad that helps. So we just see after developers drink 307.5 liters of coffee. I have to say, at the office, they do have good coffee machines at Steinberg's office in Hamburg, but I think a lot of the developers have still been working from home during COVID. So, but they've been doing just an amazing job. So. Okay, so just the question: do you have any tips for making retrospective record behave as intended? When I go to a new track and try to retrospective record it the first time, it usually messes up linear recording. So I'll just do a new project here. All right, so just add a quick instrument track. Okay, so let's say, okay, so now I just did that, and so there's my 2 retrospective records. So let's say if I just delete those, so I'm just going to come here. All right, so some musical nonsense from my non-keyboard skills, and then I could just insert it on the selected track, just like that. But let's come over here, and let's say we go to our retrospective recording. So I think, so let's say if I do insert as a linear recording, that, that kind of makes sense if you're doing like a cycle-based recording. So let's say if I come here, and this was based in play, So, you know, so this would, so let's say if I come here and I'm just kind of playing, and like every film composer, at that point we could say, okay, I want to go to insert as a linear recording, and that will take everything that I just did and insert it directly as a linear recording. Or if I come here, I could say, okay, let's insert that as a cycle recording. And now we could look at the different lanes where, you know, each of these different elements will automatically be kind of stacked, you know, on top of each other as different recordings. So it seems to me like the retrospective kind of recording works as expected, but realize that if you're doing it in linear mode, that you might have to, that's intended for kind of like a cycle-based recording scenario. So it may not work if you don't have cycle record activated. So I think that's the intention of it, but let me know if I misunderstood. See, Pablo says we need more guitar toys. All right. And Michael Pierce says you'll just encourage the guitars, but we have to realize that Pablo is a great, amazing drummer. So. All right, so I just see, sorry, but did he skip how to pitch bend audio files? So no, we did do that. I'm not sure if it was at this point in the chat yet. All right, so we have Peter Bata checking in from Montreal, Canada. Thanks for joining us. All right, we see Michael Teens has joined the live stream. And just on the live stream, just as a reference, I'm at 42 minutes in, and we're an hour and 28 minutes. So I'm going to try to catch up. But just as a quick reference, so I'm probably about 45 minutes behind. So thanks for all the great questions. And again, if you learned something, make sure you do hit the like button. So we see, hey, Greg, can you show how to use the history function in the project window? All right, so let's say I'm here and I've done a bunch of edits. I come over here. So I'll just open up the edit history. So this is the history of all of the edits. So every time that I do something here, you'll just see that this will get updated. So if I come right over here, I move these around, do this, I erase a portion. So anything that I do, I make a copy of the event. I come here, move this over here. I unmute an event. I move that there. So this all shows up in my edit history, and we could just kind of scroll right back through to undo all the edits. And you could also do this with Control or Command Z, or Control Command Shift plus Z for redo. So that's how you can kind of see everything in your edit history, and you'll have a separate edit history for the mix console. So it says I never needed it before. Since moving to Cubendo, I need a second project window as an overview of the project. I did this in our DAWs at the time years ago. Need it again for the studio. So, you know, sometimes what people could use, let me just open up, let's say a project. I'll activate this project. So, you know, if you need like a quick overview window, so I'm not sure if you need it to be full screen, but if you go to kind of the setup window here, there is kind of a project overview that you could see directly on top. So if you wanted to zoom and navigate directly into project window in the top zone, you could do that and be able to just zoom and move or elongate the selection there. So let me know if that works, if that is helpful, Marvel Jam. All right, so we see from Asim Navid. Hello, guys. I just recently purchased Cubase Elements 11. Obviously, being a student, couldn't afford Pro. One, well, I'm new to it. So thanks for joining the Cubase family and for coming on to the live stream. Let us know if there's any questions. All right, so just see a question. My Cubase will not load files larger than 4.29 gigabytes project CPR. If I load a file larger than 4.29 gigabytes, the Cubase will throw an error and say invalid project. Why is this happening? So it could be, you know, that sometimes with actual file sizes for single files, depending on your operating system, it may be too large for the operating system to recognize. So, you know, like I know, you know, like broadcast weight, you know, WAV files could only be so big. I'm not sure if there's a particular, if it's kind of imposed by the operating system, but, you know, and also it could be, you know, I'm not sure if you are out of memory on your system because that's a pretty large project file. But, you know, and if you wanted to share like a download link, I'd be happy to take a look at it and do some more research. If you wanted to share it, Ryan, to Club Cubase at steinberg.de, if you have like a download link. And as Jazz Dude mentioned, if you're on 32-bit Windows, that would probably exceed the file size of what Windows is able to open, especially if you're on Windows 7 32-bit. All right. All right, my chat field just kind of jumped on me, so I'm trying to find my spot. Sorry about that. See, I have lots of questions in my future. Okay. All right, so we see about this file size. My computer has 128 gigabytes of RAM. This is happening with standard contact player plugin. It's just not loading a project that is greater than 4.29 gigabytes. So if you could let us know if it's only with like that particular project or every single project that you're working with, that would be helpful. So maybe it's contact specific. We see Jazz Dude saying it doesn't happen on his particular system with 128 gigs of RAM. All right, we see Michael Teams is being proactive with virtual ice creams. Cedric just got 3 scoops of amaretto chocolate ice cream. All right, so we have from Dan Freeman, I have a break in a song where I'd like to last notes of instruments before the break to pitch shift down, kind of like a sliding bass or guitar notes down. Can it be done? So there's probably a couple ways to approach this. So one, maybe let's say, I'll come over here to the mix console and I'll just go to the master effects. The first thing I would try is just a super easy, quick fix is just to come right over here and just say, okay, if you go to other, check out Loop Mash FX, and there's all sorts of different effects that you could do within here. So let's just try. So let's say I want to do it right there. So you could do like little drops. So that you could do. So I'll just try a little faster. So you could do some stuff like that. You could also, I've seen some people do is, okay, they just want to take all of the tracks in just this little portion. And let's do just a render in place. And then I'll say, let's go ahead and we'll mix down to one audio file. So I'll just... All right. So we'll have this audio file. I will come over here to the sampler control. And then if you wanted to... You could do like, you know, different drops here. So let's say, okay, I just wanted this to go down 12. So while we play... So you could do some different effects like that as well, and kind of get, you know, like some, you know, interesting effects to do stuff like that. Okay, so we're just seeing John Costigan saying about his question with the delay on the piano earlier. Says the sound I had actually heard cut off more of the note attack on each of the 4 or 5 repeats, kind of like a faulty echoplex. You know, something else that you could do, John, that's kind of interesting is, let's say we'll just do... Another approach to take on this. Okay, but there is a MIDI plugin. So if it's a MIDI part, something that you could also kind of play around with is kind of MIDI Echo. So you could say, okay, I wanted this to be, you know, you could play around with. So you could say, okay, you know, you wanted to do velocity offset. We'll say our pitch offset. We'll set this to 0, but you could kind of do like a MIDI based delay. So if you say, okay, I wanted my delay to be quarter notes and the decay on a delay. And let's say the length of the delay. So now if we just come here, and we could say, okay, we just want to do beat a line. Let's make this quarter. So you could kind of play around with this as well. Also, once you get into, you know, if you get into the multi-tap delay, so say if I come here, let's go to just the inserts. And once you get into like the multi-tap delay, and this could be kind of a black hole of a weekend once you kind of get into this, you could choose to have this be like a tape-based algorithm and say, okay, I wanted this to be a quarter note delay. And then you could say for each of the taps, you could have its own bit crusher or filter. So at this point, you know, we could say, okay, just on the loop effects, we could say, okay, I just wanted to have, you know, so if you want to build a delay on top of a delay, but let's say a bit crusher, and then you could have the delay kind of automatically. And I'll take off the MIDI delay here real quick. So, and then you could also just say, okay, I want it, the bits. And then if you wanted to even put an envelope filter. You could do stuff like that and then put different delays on each of, you know, so if you say, okay, I want to put a vibrato just on the delays. So once you kind of get into here, and then if you have different taps, you can say, okay, I want to have 3 taps. And then each of the taps could have their own effects. So let's say, okay, I wanted to have a reverb. And then I want the reverb to only be on the second tap, but not on the first or third tap. So you could do all sorts of crazy stuff if you wanted to experiment with different delay effects. So check out the multi-tap delay. All right, so we have Neurotic Nexus joining us. Thanks for joining. Okay, so we have a question. Just find it again here real quick. All right. Okay, so we have a question from Michael Baun. Urban, how can I measure loudness compliance in Cubase? So there's a couple ways. One is if you wanted to have a meter to do that, I could just kind of, let me see if it's in my recent tracks. Okay. So just open up a quick like 2-track. Okay, so if I was kind of playing back a track, I could go to my meter here and go to loudness, and I could see kind of real-time metering. But if I wanted to see kind of like what the overall mix would be, I would go to my audio menu to statistics and have it do its analysis. And then once it's going to be done with that, then at this point we could see different statistics on the actual audio file, including all of your loudness standards here. So if you wanted to see what the overall measurement is, just again go to your audio menu and select the event and say go to your statistics, and then that will give you that information. All right, so we just see, is there a way to take recorded guitar audio and create feedback? So, there's lots of people that will just hook up a microphone and play the audio direct, and, play the audio. Many people, as they're tracking the guitar, will automatically, just play and then, turn towards the speakers as they're monitoring to capture that. Some people will just kind of put up a microphone and play the audio back and create kind of a feedback loop and record that as audio. I've heard that there's some plugins that will kind of generate the feedback, but the ones I've heard haven't really kind of been so authentic sounding. But if you just kind of play a guitar track through speakers and then put a microphone in front of the speakers, you could generate a feedback loop, a real feedback loop, and have fun with that, and add reverb and add your feedback to the guitar. Okay, so just read through some more. Okay, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great. All right, so we see any ETA for Apple Silicon native compatibility. So I know the developers are working on it, and it's a pretty big undertaking, having to do a lot of the plugins over from scratch, and some components from third parties I don't think will ever be Apple Silicon native. So, figuring out how to deal with that as well. So, but I know developers are working on it, and hopefully there will be an announcement soon. So we have a question, is there a possibility to visualize MIDI notes from other tracks? Example, bass line in the piano roll. Yeah, so we could do that. All you have to do is really just kind of select the two different events. So let's say if I come here to, let's say the Schubert piece. So let's say I want to look at the oboe and the cello part. So I'll select both of them and then I'll just hit like, look at them both in the edit screen. So at this point, and if I want to change the colors, not based on velocity, but based on the part, I could see that we have our cello part here and the bass part, and you could pick which one that you're actually that you're editing by just coming right up here. So say, okay, now I want to edit the oboe parts. And then if you click on the cello at this point, you know, you could just click and that will switch what is the active part, or you could have it edit the active part only. So at that point, you know, you could just come over here and you could see multiple parts all within one editor. So just select which parts you want to see. And then if you go to, you know, Command E, or, you know, now if I want to go to the score editor, I could see both parts, or go to the key editor and I could see both parts there and edit against each other if you want to. Okay, so we see a question, how do you print out endless arpeggiated patterns in Retrolog? Okay, so let's see if I have a Retrolog thing going on in this project. All right, so I'll just add a quick Retrolog. All right, and every time I want to find just a... All right, so let's say... All right, so let's say I am there and I go to my Arpeggiator section. So one of the things that you could do is just say, okay, I want it to come here, click on record. And then as you kind of just, you know, play chords. So now that I've hit record, it'll now be put into this buffer memory. So we see this little MIDI icon here, the 5-pin DIN, and then we could just drag that directly onto the project window. So that's all you have to do. So just go to the Arpeggiator page inside of Retrolog and click on record, play the parts, and then at that point you could just drag the parts that were generated automatically into the project window for you. We see from Neurotic Nexus, what's going to come after Monday? My guess would be Tuesday, but I don't know. So just see question, can I use my Helix Stomp to reamp in Cubase? So what a lot of people do is, you know, there's a couple of ways of doing it. So a lot of times you could, you know, if you're running Cubase Pro, many people will come over here and go to external effects, and you could take inputs and outputs of your, you know, of your audio interface and say, okay, I want to take, you know, add an external effects, and we can say, okay, it's going to be, let's say, a mono send and a stereo return, let's say. Okay, so now, and we'll call this our Helix. Let me just make sure it's the right one. Okay, so we'll say Helix. And at this point, if I go to an audio track, all I would have to do is come here to Inserts, and then we go to External Plugins, and then you could just say, okay, we're going to go to, I think we had to set up as, and then, you know, you'll see the Helix, and then you could just measure the delay. And at that point, what it's going to do is as you hit play, the signal will go out to the Helix, and then the return signal will then be sent directly back. So you could reamp doing that way with hardware, or if you have the plugin, you could just run the plugin as well. So, all right, so I've been granted 3 scoops of Black Diamond ice cream from Michael Teams. Thank you. And Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. So we see from Jeff Sabelski, Nuendo Live is Thursday after Cubase Live. So, you know, we do ours on Tuesday and Friday. So it'll be on Thursday, and I think it starts 4 p.m. U.S. Eastern. So like 3 hours after the normal start time of this live stream. So. Okay, we see Jeff Sabelski's whacked, and he's number 56 on the likes. So thank you for that, Jeff. Okay, reading through comments. Sorry. Okay, so I just see, hi Greg, I have 10 backing tracks in Cubase. How do I get them to all be equally loud? All right, so let's say if I just had, I'll just kind of come over here, jump back. So if you want like consistent volume levels between different like backing tracks, so let's say, all right, so I will come over here. So say we have our backing tracks, and so say I just had these, and I'm just going to create some new audio files here, so just to mimic the behavior. So I will just do a bounce selection here real quick. So a couple ways if you want it kind of all of your backing tracks. And let's say they were all kind of inconsistent volume. What you could do, and if you wanted to be consistent, is just kind of come right over here. Bear with me just for a second. Okay, so if these are all like different volume levels, I could select all of them and go to processes and just choose to normalize. And at this point, we could say, I want to do loudness normalize. So I could say, okay, let's make these all minus 12 LUFS or whatever value you want. And this will kind of go through and just process each of the audio files so that they'll have consistent volume between all of the different tracks as we monitor. So we can see now all of them will be kind of the same consistent volume. So select all of your backing tracks and go to audio, to processes, and you could just go to normalize, and then you could just kind of match the volume between them like that. All right. All right, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. And if you've learned something new, make sure you do hit the like button, and that allows us to continue to do these live streams. Okay, so we see from Bass de Beer, Greg just saying it's really awesome you spend this time and knowledge with us. Cubase is a great DAW and I like to learn more. Just starting out, basically, your streams help a lot, so that's good. Thanks for joining us and being a part of the community. And he's in Europe, so. Okay, so we see how do you do one shot in Groove Agent like MPC? So all right, let's just get a project here. Okay, so let's say if I have a loop. So I'm just going to drag an audio file to a loop here. All right, so once we come over here in Groove Agent, so I think if we just, all right, so let's say if I just wanted to play. So all you have to do is select the pad, and we can do this on an individual pad. Go to the, under Instrument, go to Edit, to Sample, and then you could just put it into one shot here. So if you wanted to, you know, alternate or put it no loop, so just put it into one shot right there. So, or if you want to reverse, so you could just activate one shot mode directly there. So I just see, did some version of MPC can connect with Groove Agent for analog real-time typing? You know, so if you wanted to, you know, anything that takes, you know, so, you know, anything that transmits MIDI, you could use. So, you know, when you say typing, I mean, you could program different drum beats. So if you wanted to, you know, come over here and, you know, just anything that's MIDI, you know, or if you have your drum pads, and if you wanted to, you know, when you say typing, I'm not sure if that's like a step sequencing, but if you wanted to come here and just, you know, do typing like that, you could just say, okay, I want to put it into step sequencing, And, you know, even if you want to see it more in like an MPC style environment, we could just kind of come right over here to like, you know, your drum grid and say, okay, I want this to start on, you know, beat 2. So let's say if I put this into step entry mode, let me see if I have it activated. So if we activate step entry mode, I could now click and say, okay, we want to start on measure 2, and I want to put in, you know, 4 in the floor. So I could just come here and just put in my different drum beats right there and say, okay, now I want it to put in hi-hats, so I could move my timeline back here and say I want my hi-hats to be 8th note triplets. You know, I could, you know, so you can put in different rhythmic values. Anything that kind of transmits MIDI will kind of work the same way. So, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding or if there's a specific thing when you say typing in. See that the Cube, first learned Cubase in college on a G4 Mac Cube. So so we see Dan Freeman. Greg, it seems a lot of us like the live stream idea a lot, even more so your style or presentation. Is there an email address for us to send letters of our appreciation to your boss? I guess if you want to send me an email, I could, you know, I'd be happy to share my boss's email with you. So, but he's Preston Gray at Yamaha. So Preston Gray, Gray. So, but I'm sure you could probably look him up on LinkedIn or something like that. But if you want to email me, I could share his address, his email address with you. So. Okay, so we see from Jeff Sabelski, Greg, could you please show how the 4 effect auxes are activated for different programs in the slot rack in Hallion Sonic? I think I'm missing routing issues within Hallion Sonic 3 Hallion. Okay, so let's take a look at it. And thanks for the sentiment, Dan. I appreciate it. Just glad to be helpful. Okay, so let's add a quick Hallion Sonic SE here so we can show the effects. Okay. Okay, so let's say I have my Silk Roads. So I just have one note here. So let's go to my effects section. So let's say my first effect, I want it to be reverb. So now, and my second effect, I want it to be a delay. Okay. And my third aux send, let's have it be maybe a pitch shifter. And the fourth, I want it to be maybe a flanger, something kind of obvious here. Okay, now every time that I have an effect send enabled, so I have one effect per send here, but I could also have this act as almost like an effects chain. So if I wanted the reverb to feed let's say a stereo panner, or let's do something like maybe the reverb feeds a filter. So, or wah-wah, let's go do that. So then I could say auxiliary send 1 will feed the reverb going into the wah-wah. Auxiliary send 2 will feed the multi-delay. So when I go to mix, And I see my FX2 here. So this will be, I believe, our delay. So I hit one note. Okay, and then we go to FX3. I think this is our octaver. Okay, and let's come to FX4, which I think is our flanger. And if I go to FX1, this will be the reverb going into the wah-wah. So the reverb then feeds to wah-wah. So now I could have, you know, each of these effect sends. I could have 4 effect sends, and each of these effect sends can build a combination of 4 effects stacked per effect send. So it gives you kind of a lot of flexibility, and sometimes with flexibility can come complexity, but you don't necessarily have to make it complex. So hopefully that makes sense, Jeff. Let me know if it's still not clear. All right, so we see from Marvel Jam, anyone here using Avid S1 and dock over Yukon with Cubase and or Nuendo? I'm getting very close to ditching my Slate Raven MT2i touchscreens. So maybe other people could comment. I haven't really worked with either of them. I used to work with the Euphonic System 5 quite a bit, which is kind of the originator of the Yukon control when Steinberg and Euphonics were doing it originally before it was acquired by Avid. Okay, so we see from Michael Bown, need to learn more about this automation with Vca Fader. All right, so we'll jump back to that project. See if it's in my... All right, let me just... have lots of projects open today. Thanks for everyone for the wonderful questions. So I just want to, this project here. Okay, so once again, once we have automation, so we can see that these tracks are, you know, going up and down in automation. Not that it makes any sense musically to the track, but I just wanted to create kind of an example where we could have contrary automation where some tracks are going up while others are going down. So now with the VCAs, again, I'll select all of my drums and I'm going to right click and add to VCA to the selected track. And if I do it to the selected track this time, that would be helpful. All right, so now all of the tracks are feeding this VCA. So if I bring everything down, it's almost like moving kind of the VCA positions, but we still see kind of the automation still kind of going in its motion. So it's still increasing when it needed to be louder and decreasing when it needed to be softer, but just in smaller or more amounts depending upon the position of the VCA fader. So the trick is when we have existing automation here and we automate the VCA fader, then now I could just kind of move this and now what it's done is we can see this area here where we had written the automation. So this is the result of the VCA automation. And if I wanted this track, it'll still play back the automation here. But if I want it, instead of kind of the original automation to be combined with the effect of the VCA automation, at that point, if you go to the VCA fader and just kind of hover above right here, you can see this little drop down menu. That's when you can combine the automation of the VCA fader so that you have one automation point at that point. All right, so glad to see that Jazz Dudes had a conversation with Matthias, who's our Matthias Kelman, who's the product manager for Steinberg. So in the Discord, so Matthias is a wonderful guy and great friend and colleague. Fortunate to work with him. All right, so we see from Dan Freeman, so thankful VST faders were explained last week. Spent hours in the past, was just trying to have functionality. Huge thank you. That's great. I assume it's VCA faders maybe, but. All right, great that Bob Sandifer could make the live stream. Thanks for joining, being a part of the community. All right, so we see Yarn is joined the live stream, so I'll probably get to your question towards the end, but glad you could be a part of it. We have a bunch of questions to go over. All right, so we see from Sven, that was exactly what he needed to do with the tempo track. Thanks. Yeah, glad that was the answer and it was an easy solution. So we see Pablo saying we need a coffee plugin for Cubase. That sounds good. All right, wonderful to see JVI on the live stream. It just says he loves these hangouts. And Jeff Sabelski asked if Steinberg has kegs of beer too, because he does like his Ninja coffee maker. So I haven't seen beer at the office, but you know, there's lots of places to go right near the office. They're kind of right in the middle of Hamburg. So wonderful, amazing office building. So. So we see from Bob, so what does Yamaha have at their main office? So they have like some really nice coffee machines. They have a wonderful cafeteria, like where all the employees eat at Hamamatsu. So it's really pretty exceptional and a great, they have a really cool kind of Yamaha museum at the main office too, which is pretty amazing to see kind of the whole history of the company. All right, so we just see a question. Hi, is it possible to find chords of an existing song? So, you know, if you have parts that are in MIDI, it could be done. So let's say if I go to, so if I have parts that are in MIDI, it could automatically be determined, but it doesn't do it from an audio file. So if I wanted to take this particular track, what you could do is go to the project menu. So let's say this is like a piano part. So if we look at it, and this is kind of the basis for the song. So at this point, we could go to our, if we go to chord track, we can say create chord track from the event. And as we come over here, this will automatically create the chord track based on the MIDI. So it doesn't do it for audio. Maybe in the future. So who knows? All right, we see that once again, Pablo is still famous according to Michael Teams. So. Read through comments. All right, my chat field jumped, so I'm just trying to. Okay, so here we are from Eric Ross. Greg, monitoring guitar track. If I record guitar, I have to have monitor button on track selected here. But when I play back, the monitor button has to be, I click to hear it back. Is there a way around this? Okay, so, if you're monitoring the track, so let's say if you're recording a track, you're not going to, and you're not going to hear it until you actually, so if you wanted to monitor the input of the recorded signal, you just simply turn this on. And then that function may be left on and you go to play back with the monitor track and you don't hear like the vocal until the monitoring is turned off. So there is a preference for this. So if you go to your preferences and go to, let's say to VST, and you'll see auto monitoring style. So you could just say, I usually like tape machine style, but you could also choose just to have it while record enabled or while record running. So at that point, or with tape machine style, so as soon as it's been recorded, so that will automatically, as soon as you start to hit play, so just experiment with those preferences. I prefer tape machine style, but you could also, by default, it's set to manual as kind of a conservative selection. But if you just change that to tape machine style, then after you record, the track will not be in monitor enabled, so you don't have to manually do it every single time. All right, so we just see Michael Bound just saying, I'm new to Cubase also, need more coffee, really liking what I see in Dorico, will never go back. So it's great. Yeah, I think the Dorico team's done amazing work. I think Dorico is almost 5 years old now, so it's been wonderful to kind of see it from its inception. And I think I was the first American to learn that we had kind of hired on the Dorico team before they announced it in the company and stuff. So it's been wonderful to see those guys just coming up with such a wonderful program. So. All right, so we see that from Dan Freeman, says, detuning the last note of the song, a perfect answer. Thank you. So glad you have a lot of fun with that. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Are there any program preferences relative to being internet connected or not connected that may affect performance or stability? So I don't think that there's any program preferences. Sometimes, network cards, if you look like, especially on a Windows platform where you have the latency monitoring, I think it's a DPC latency mon utility. Sometimes, network drivers and network adapters can cause, I've seen in a lot of systems where they can cause kind of interrupts that could, inhibit smoother real-time audio performance. So some of them are fine. So, but there's not really like a specific Cubase preference for that. But sometimes if you do the DPC latency monitor, you can notice that the network drivers can cause problems, especially sometimes with, I think it could be more problematic with kind of Wi-Fi, as, it could be constantly kind of looking for the Wi-Fi signal and the Wi-Fi data. So, see Michael Pierce just saying he hasn't dared to use the multi-tap delay. I reckon I could lose more than a weekend. So yeah, it's pretty scary once you get into it. But if you want to go delay crazy, it's pretty. It's probably the most comprehensive delay around. We're seeing Cubase Junkie. It's great to have you on the live stream. His multi-delay is his favorite plugin. All right, and we see that the multi-tap delay that will help with John Costigan's situation. And I duplicated what he heard. That's good. You had a good description, John. So that helps. Okay, so we have a question from Jeff Sabelsky. Greg, with multi-programs in Hallian Sonic 3, does the master volume on the Hallian Sonic VST behave any differently when using multiple VST tracks with the VCA? I wish my own questions didn't confuse me. So I don't think you're going to notice any, if you have everything in, I think like here, if I have everything kind of broken down into one instance of Hallian Sonic SE here with multiple files, that, if I bring a VCA, if these are all going to, and let's say if I go to my mix output, most of these may be going to the main output, so if I bring down my, if these are all going to the same stereo output, all being kind of summed with different volume levels, and I bring down the mix console fader of the Hallian Sonic SE main here, that would, that would bring all those down relative. I don't have these automated. So if I had automation for the volume of each of these, it may make a slight difference, but, all the effects here aren't being, they're not applying to, if I was taking these to individual outputs and those individual outputs had different send effects, then you could benefit from a VCA. But if you're kind of doing all the effects internally, I don't think that a VCA may not make a huge difference for the internal sounds. So hope I understood correct. All right, so we see Michael Teams is having to step aside, and we'll see him on Friday. I see Cubase Junkie still loving the Apache SX, the MIDI Arpeggiator plugin, so it's still very powerful. All right, so we see from a comment about the retrospective record that we showed earlier is the tip you gave earlier is going to change my life. I was using insert from track input as linear recording as my default retrospective record instead of insert from all MIDI inputs. Yeah, so yeah, it's kind of funny. One of my composer friends, he's like, oh, you know, I was just kind of talking to him, my friend Fred Corey, who's on our last Zoom. He's just like, I haven't hit the record button in years. You know, he just does everything retrospective record because, you know, inevitably the best theme of all time will just kind of pop out, and, you know, it's never when you're in record. So. Yeah, so, and he just says, I changed that now and I haven't had a retrospective record error yet. Thank you so much. I haven't had this work correctly since the linear cycle retrospective record was introduced. Yeah, so I think it was 10.5 when that was kind of taken up to the next level of the retrospective records. So some people would do retrospective record, and if they were kind of in a cycle mode while they're doing it, you know, they couldn't have it automatically go into the cycle mode. So, but I'm glad that worked for you. And all right, so we see Cubase Junkie is referring to the Apache SX plugin, and Fred Robinson says, is that one of the standard plugins? Don't recall seeing it, noticing it. So what it is a MIDI plugin. So let's say if I have a piano here, and I will go to the MIDI track itself and go to like the MIDI insert, and then you could see kind of the Apache SX here. So now you can, so I'm just holding down a chord. And then you could come over here and say, okay, I just play one chord. I want it to go up. And you could even kind of just drag a sequence in if you wanted to drag and drop different MIDI sequences. So it's like a MIDI plugin that will allow you to do like really complex arpeggiations and record that directly back into the project. Okay, and I also see Cubase Chunky says, when you hit freeze MIDI modifiers, you can transform the ARP into MIDI notes and continue to alternate your sounds. So, and one other cool thing with the Apache SX, let's say if I have a chord, you could also, let's say if I'm just here, I could just have this record. So if you click on the record button here, I'm just going to hold down chords. And now without, you know, if I just had everything, so what I recorded was just like 3 chords, but, and then if you wanted to turn that into the Apache, you know, to what we see in the Arpeggiator, you could click on MIDI to freeze MIDI modifiers. But if you just click here, I just will hold down the chords and it will record all of the arpeggiations that are generated in real time directly to the part itself. So you have kind of like a live capture of what the Apache is generating. Yeah, and I did a whole tutorial on the Arpeggio plugins maybe last year, I think. So I think Apache says when people have Cubase elements, I think they only get Apache 5. So I'm not sure if they have MIDI inserts. So let's see if I open up Cubase elements, if there's MIDI. I think I just have Elements 10.5, but I don't think it changed in 11. And let's see if there's the MIDI plugins. I don't think may not be in the Elements level. I'll just make sure just to verify. Yeah, so no MIDI plugins in the Cubase Elements level. So I think it's Artist and Pro, and of course Nuendo that will have that. All right, so we see Cedric just saying it's sad the like button can't be whacked or can be whacked only once, else the number of likes would certainly exceed the attendees. What fun. So thank you for the sentiments. I appreciate. All right, so we see, hi Greg, if and when Windows 11 compatibility will be developed. So we just got I just got kind of a notice from our support team, and they're still going through the testing, and so far they haven't found any issues with Cubase 11. So they're still going through the process. It's a pretty lengthy testing cycle of quality assurance to when they're going through an operating system. But all of our audio interface hardware is working and is compatible already, and they haven't run into anything yet with Cubase 11, but they're still doing the test. So all right, so we have Rob checking in from Tarpon Springs, and he's just thanks for your help with this robust program. We've learned so much from these Hangouts, so I'm glad it's been helpful. And thanks for joining us and being a part of the community. All right, we see Graham Witcher has been able to make it, and he's been exploring Retrolog, Groove Agent, and Pad Shop for a new track. That's great. All right, so we see question, hi Greg, is there a way of audio warping all tracks as a group, not just a single track? This is from Steve. So currently every audio warping is going to be kind of done to a single track. I know that the development team is very aware of the, of the desire for being able to do that across multiple tracks. So you could do it a little bit with, if you're doing kind of like drum quantizing, but it's not really set up for, so it's kind of set up currently for a single track, but hopefully we'll see, I know that it's been a very common feature request, and I'll pass it along. All right, so I just see from Pablo, Greg is the boss of Yamaha/Steinberg. So I'm not, I'm just a lowly employee. I've been fortunate to work with the company for a long time, so they usually leave me alone. So I'm lucky in that regard, but I don't get to make any decisions really. But I just get to talk to a lot of people, so and feel lucky that I'm able to do this job, and But thanks for the kind words. All right, and we see great kind words from Tim Weinheimer too. Thank you for that. Just saying that Cubase is the best DAW, and support makes it better than the rest. So thank you, Tim, from Mission Viejo. So the president of Yamaha Corporation of America, he lives in Mission Viejo as well. Could be your neighbor. All right, we see Mark Rabin from Montana joining us. Okay, so we see a question. Hi, how do you gradually speed up an audio track? So if it's going to be something like an audio loop, it's pretty easy. Really what you need to do is to just kind of place it into musical mode and increase the tempo. So we'll come here. I'll just put a quick loop in. Okay, so let's say I have this loop. Okay, so once you kind of know what the tempo of the audio file is, we could select it and place it into musical mode. So I'm going to copy this a couple times, and I'm going to add a tempo track. Okay, so once something is in musical mode, so again, we could select the events. It's going to be almost a tempo parasite, if you will. So as you play, I could just kind of drop in, and I'll switch. So if I wanted to ramp up the tempo, so let's say, okay, now I just wanted to have it speed up. Or just kind of speed up over a longer period of time. You could just have it do that. So once again, you want to make sure that you kind of know what the tempo of the audio loop is. If you don't know what it is, you could go to the beat calculator. And if you wanted to just come right over here, just say, okay, this is going to be, you know, however many beats it is, it will calculate the tempo for you. You could enter that tempo value into the pool window and place it into musical mode right there, or place into musical mode from the info line, and then as you change the tempos, it will speed up and slow down. So that's how you can gradually speed up an audio track. All right, so we see that the effects explanation for Howie and Sonic was clear and helpful to Jeff Zabelski. That's great. All right, so we have Kush from San Diego. How can I mix down to audio tracks without effects, pannings, automation, etc.? I want raw individual tracks with no alteration to mix at a Pro Studio. Do OMF files have this metadata? So yeah, you don't need to do OMF because that could get a little weird in some ways. So let's say, you know, if we have a project here, and let's say if you have like a bunch of edits and, you know, maybe you wanted to make like stem files that could be incorporated at a studio, all you have to, and you don't want to include the internal processing and use their outboard gear, their console, their plugins, etc. All you have to do is go to your file menu. You want to make sure that, select like the length of the event and put the left and right locators. So, here I just selected an event that's as long as the project, and I hit the letter P as in parts to locator, and that will put the left and right locators around the event. Go to your file menu to export to audio mixdown, select multiple. And when you see this little effects section here, you could just choose disabled dry. And what that will allow you to do is we could say, okay, I want to export multiple files. So I could say, okay, I want all of my output channels, my effects channels rendered, all of my audio channels, all of my virtual instruments, if they're being utilized in the production. And that will just come over here and make, choose, okay, I want it to be 48K, 88.2, whatever sample rate, bit depth that you want. And then that will export each of the files. We could have it go to a new location, or you could have it automatically go into the project mix down folder or to its own unique folder, and then you could take it to any other room. So again, just go to your file, export audio mix down, and under effects, choose disabled, and then that should help. Okay, so my chat field just kind of jumped on me, so. Okay, so we see, does anyone know how to fix Cubase start or record delay after pressing spacebar to play? So it could be that, you know, let's say if I was pressing the spacebar or record, so let's say if I come here, I'll just turn on the metronome. So let's say I come here. Okay, let me just... Okay, I'll just not activate that for record. All right, so let's say if I just play. All right, so let's say, all right, so it could be that maybe you have the count in activated. So if you see this little option here, and if you don't see that, if you kind of like in the lower right hand corner of the transport, it could be hidden. So by default, it may look like this. And if we come over here, you could just expand that out a bit. So make sure that, so now if I have my pre-count activated here on the transport, it may, so let's say if I just go to record, you know, you may get kind of that count in. So you could just kind of activate your count in there. So make sure that you don't have the count in turned on. So let's say, I'll just switch this to 4/4. Okay, so let's say if I go here and I just play and the count in is turned on. But let's say if I go to hit record, you may get like a 2-measure count in. But if I just wanted to hit record directly there, so you could just kind of activate the count in. And so it sounds like that might be on. So give that a try and let us know. So we see from Cubase Junkie says, I want to make something just only using the retrospective record a whole song. That would be fun. I think that turns you into a film composer, apparently, according to my friends. So yeah, but give it a try. You can come up with some interesting things. Okay, so we see from Andy Costo. Hi, Greg. First of all, you rock. How can I try different drum kits in Groove Agent, but keep the pattern the same? So let's go ahead and take a look. So we'll add a Groove Agent. Okay, so I'll just load up quick. Okay, so okay, so let's say I'm playing kind of this pattern. Okay, but I just wanted to load up different kits. So you see this little folder icon here. Let's go over here. And now I could just go to, and I'll select, you can load up different instruments or different kits, which will be kind of, so I could say, now I just come here. All right, so let me just, all right, so let me just go back here. So I think if we come over here, okay, so let's say I'll do a different approach. So instead of doing that, I'm just going to right click on the agent and I'm just going to load kit. So now I could just audition my different kits. You can always come up with really interesting results. So we're playing the same pattern. So again, just right click and just say load kit. And just experiment and try stuff that shouldn't work and just see what happens. And come up with really interesting and creative results. So once again, just right click on the agent and just load kit instead of load kit with pattern. So I see from Stephen Mikes, it says, I love Quadra Fuzz, but it's GUI could use an update. So, I think, when they try to do it, they don't want to make it look kind of like a classical orchestra thing, but, it does quite a bit. So let's say if I just wanted to come over here, if you're not familiar with Quadra Fuzz, you can find it under distortion. So, I think for kind of the plugin it is, that it's kind of, it's kind of intended to be very kind of industrial, but to be able to kind of access your different things, and, plugin GUIs could be a matter of taste, but I think, this kind of conveys the processing capabilities kind of being, industrial and a bit retro to kind of match the character of the plugin, but I'll pass it along as feedback regardless. And we see Cubase Junkie says it was made like that on purpose to make it look dirty and vintage. So yeah, I would tend to agree with Cubase Junkies, but so just see also if I record audio out from the Modi X via USB, I have somehow managed to record the metronome. So sometimes if you're using, like the Modi X can function as a USB audio interface as well as transmitting MIDI through the USB connection, as well as, being a tone generator. So a lot of people will have the click track, so it could be that you're sending MIDI data to it, but the audio is also being sent out of it, including the click track. So realize that, your tone module and your audio interface, could be sending, they could both be sending audio signals out to your Modi X So realize that if you're doing an audio transfer that you may just have, if you're not using a separate audio interface for the click track, that you probably will just have to turn off the click track just by hitting the letter C or clicking on this icon in the lower right-hand corner. So. Okay, so we just see Greg, can that Arpeggiated effect use chord tracks? I think so. Let's go give it a quick try. Okay, so let's say I wanted to be instant composer. We'll have to start in D minor, of course. All right, so let's say. Okay, so let's add a instrument. So let's say just a quick. Okay, so let's say I want to play the this directly into the monitor track, and on this particular track, let's come over here to the Arpeggiated. So and now you have a new hit song. And if I wanted to just, record, again, I could just come here to the Hallian Sonic and put the Arpeggiated in, and I'll just hit record. So you could do stuff like that if you wanted to. So you could just have it play. So. Okay, just reading through comments. So just saying about it's about a second late, just about the delay when hitting play. So, also, when you're doing this, I don't remember if you mentioned this, but if you go to your studio setup, the first thing you want to do is make sure that you're using like the ASIO driver for the device. So if you have an audio interface, so if you're using kind of, some like a built-in laptop interface, that might be adding more latency to your system as well. And it says if I put a song from YouTube and put it in Cubase, it's always off beat. So yeah, if you could let us know which audio interface you're using. So. All right, so I just see, hello, Greg. I have questions why my Cubase 11 don't doesn't open my old projects like 10.5. So as you can see, if I come over here, I could open up like lots of old projects. I think, let's come over here. So, you know, so I'm not sure if it's like particular plugins that are causing it. Here's like a project from Cubase 7. So, you know, if there's plugins that are being referenced in the project, or if it's using technologies that aren't available in 11, but most of the stuff between 10.5 and 11 works. But, you know, so I could open up Cubase SX1 version projects in here from 2001, so without any problem. So I don't, you know, if you could let us know exactly what projects, and if you're getting any messages. See Mandy Lane saying Cubase also looks very professional compared to other programs. Okay, my chat field just kind of jumped on me. Let me just... All right, so I think I'm back to where I was. Thanks again for all the wonderful questions. If you've learned something new, make sure that you actually hit the like button. Okay, so I just see, hi, is it possible to output a mix minus feed when recording overdubs? I'd like to send musicians my mix from Cubase and use direct monitoring for their own instrument. So, you know, what a lot of people will do is, let's come to this. Okay, so let's say if I was overdubbing. Okay, so when recording overdubs, I'd like to send musicians my mix from Cubase and use direct monitoring for their own instrument. So, you know, if you wanted to kind of set like, you know, a mix, you know, like an alternate mix for the musicians, I'm not sure. So, I mean, you could use direct monitoring for their own instrument already, but let's say if I wanted to do bass, I could select everything here and we could use this in conjunction with the control room. So let me select all of the tracks in my project. I'll go to my larger mix console, and first thing I want to do is to make sure that I have a control room active, and I wanted to add a Q mix. So let's say I want to add a Q, and we'll say this is for the bassist. So I'll just come over here. Let's say, okay, bass player, Q mix, and I'm tracking him or her. Then I could select all of my different tracks here. And what I want to do is go to your racks and make sure that you have Q sends checked. So go to the racks drop down. And let's go ahead and make sure that we have the control room activated here. So this is my bass mix. And what I want to do is to right click, and I want to come here and I'll just say, let's use the current mix. I'll activate First, I'll activate all of the cues. All right, and I'll just kind of close this. So let's say all right, so let's get to the racks and our cue sends. So now we see our cue sends. Then I could right click here, and then I want to use the current mix levels. And then, you know, if you wanted to send the musician like his, you know, the instruments, like the mix to the instruments, you know, to the musicians, and assuming that, you know, you have this connection here set to go to like outputs, like, you know, when you go to the Q mix, you could send that to outputs, and you could do it probably in stereo. And at that point, you could have different Q mixes. So let's say the bass player, you know, wants to hear more of themselves in a mix. So if you wanted to monitor the mix for the musician, I could just come here and you know, you could have different cue levels here for each individual musician. But yeah, or if you wanted to exclude them from the queue, you could do that just in the control room here and just say, okay, you know, they're going to monitor everything except for the queue here. So, you know, they could hear everything except for themselves and monitor off of the direct monitoring. So let me know if that works for you. So I just see from Andy Lane, is this the reason Cubase is the most expensive DAW then? So I don't think Cubase is the most expensive. I don't think in the United States. I think it's kind of on par with many of the other programs. But I think by time you purchase a lot of the third-party components of the less expensive programs, that, you know, Cubase looks like a bargain to get the same level of functionality. All right, so we have a question from JVI. In the chord track, I add a chord, select A, then minor, but I can't select any sixths. It starts at sevenths. I'm missing something. I've also tried other chords, major, etc. Still don't see sixths. So let's take a look. So let's add a chord track. Okay, so I see A minor. I could do A minor 6 chords. So I just see it right here. So we see it starting at sevenths, but since it could also be a 6/13th chord, it seems like you could just enter it there. So let me know if that isn't available for you to enter in. So, you know, so once again, just kind of come here, and if you look at all the options, so it may not go in numeric order. So I think it may go just by kind of popularity of chord tensions. So, but look for the 6/13th chord there. So let me know if that helps, JVI. So I just see a question from Kai Wen Franklin. Do you get Halion Symphony Orchestra with Halion 6? So no, it's not included with that, but if you do get the Absolute collection, like Absolute 5, the Halion Symphonic Orchestra just is included with that. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, so we see from Jay from Connecticut. Thanks for joining the live stream. Great to see you on there, on here. Okay, it says I need more organization. I need a path to compressor to compress mixer channels into folders. As above, not hide. Want to mirror channel plus track folders, which is logical reflection and equally valid as a track. Okay, so if we're in a big project, so let's say if I'm here and I have, just, all right, so let's say I have all of my drums selected here. Okay, and let's say in this project I have lots of other tracks. So I need a path to compress mixer channels into folders. So, you know, if you go to the visibility, you know, you can just hide, you know, so if you hold down the shift key, I could say, let's just see only the drums. So I could do that as well. So I know you say into folders above, not hide. I want my mixer channel plus track folders. So, you know, so while the mixer doesn't have folders, I mean, this gets you to the same place. You know, if we have these going to a drum group, you know, I could also just activate the drum group as well. So here I have all my drums and the drum group. And if I had that drum group within the folder, we could do that. So, you know, it's no problem to see, you know, the group folders as well. So, you know, it could really depend on if it's how you have the tracks organized. So if I just automatically move the drums into the folder track, you know, at this point I could say when we go to our configurations, I could say, okay, we're going to, you know, show all tracks. And now if I have the folder with my drums, which you could actually create from a macro, I could just hold down shift. And now I'm only seeing the folder and the drums. So, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding. I understand that it's equally, the folder is equally valid, but I'm not sure if it's a group track because, you know, what do you want to look at in a folder track? In the mixer, as there's no processing, it can be done on the folder, but you could just simply, you know, if you have everything organized, you could do it like that pretty easily. And I think it gets you to the same spot in the end. Okay, so we have a question. After sending a track to an effects channel, how do I pan that track in the mixing console? When I do it, it doesn't do much. Is it because it's a stereo effects channel? Thank you. Your help is much appreciated. So let's say, do it on another project here. Okay, so let's say I'll do this and I want to put like a flanger on the bass track here, something obvious. So I'm going to add an effects channel to the selected channel here. So let's do something really obnoxious and go to modulation. And all right, so we'll put a heavy flanger on. So now when we play, right, so let me just mess that up. So I'm going to turn on. Okay, so now I have. Okay, so it says, how do I pan that track in the mixing console? When I do it, it doesn't do much. So let's say if I want to take the. So now we could pan and have the flanger only on one side, or you could have it on the center. So sometimes the effects can be set on, you know, like a stereo effect. You may not notice it as much. Like, let me just do a different effect here. So I'll do a chopper. So now if I just come here to the chopper effect, you only hear the chopper on the right hand side or only on the left hand side. So, you know, so you could do that. Now, one of the things that a lot of people miss is if we come here to the bass channel, you could actually go to panning. And I could say I want the flanger on the right and the chopper in the left. So even though it's a stereo effects on each track, you could pan independently if you wanted to as well. So, you know, it could be that when you have the effect kind of panned all the way to one side, if it's kind of an effect that goes back and forth between left and right channels, that it may not be as apparent. All right, so we have Alexander checking in from Moscow. Okay, so we have a question. Is it possible to record MIDI from another source? I mean, add as an input of Hallian Sonic, the scaler, how I can record. I guess it's MIDI from scaler. So I don't know scaler. I think it's similar to, like, you know, what you could do with like the, you know, chord functionality. So let's say I'll quickly add an instrument track here. And as I do this, we'll just say, okay, you know, if the plugin has it, check to see if I don't have a license of scaler, but see if it shows up as, you know, a lot of programs will show up as a MIDI input source. So let's say, for instance, if I add a copy of Groove Agent or utilities, MIDI utilities often, so when I come here, I could see on the input, now that we've added a Groove Agent, we could have Groove Agent as a MIDI input source. So the Groove Agent can actually play back different sounds from this. So see if it's like that. And if that's still not doing it, you know, maybe if you go into the editor here, you know, and let's say, you know, there is scale assistance. So you could have it automatically use the editor scale. So you could have Cubase determine the scale. You could actually set up your own custom musical scale. And at this point you could say, I only want to filter and see, you know, notes within the scale, or notes that are actually have events. So you might be able to do a lot of this, and you could also snap live input. So you can say, okay, I'm in D and I'm in step entry mode. I could just go, and all of those notes would automatically be only within the key of D. So you could do stuff like that. So, but you know, I think most things, if they're trying to integrate with the DAW, will probably have a MIDI output from the source, but I'm not, again, familiar with Scalar. See, Mandy Lane is going to make her own custom DAW, so that's good. My son's bus is probably just arriving now. All right. All right, so just seeing Jazz Dude saying Scalar is very, very easy. Just use the MIDI out and in source of any VST instruments. Right, reading through. Okay, so we just see a question. When I import a pattern in Groove Agent and playback, I hear the imported track, but Groove Agent carries on playing the original pattern. In essence, two kits are playing over each other. So when you do that, so let's say if I come here and I'll just open up. You know, because Groove Agent can have its own internal sequencer. But if I drag this pattern out into my project window, and at this point, let's say I play, you know, so this pattern is triggering sounds in Groove Agent, but Groove Agent is playing as well. What you need to do is just, you know, if you have follow transport, just hit stop here. And then the internal sequencer of Groove Agent will stop playing. But if I hit play, now you can hear kind of, you know, where the internal sequencer is playing with the MIDI that's in the part. So just hit stop, and then you'll hear that stop just like that. All right, so I know we had a bunch of questions sent in, so let's go through some of these questions. Thanks for all the wonderful discussion. Hope that everyone's learned a tip or trick today. All right, I'm going to revert this project here. Okay. All right, let me just find the first question. Okay, I want to know if there's something similar to Pro Tools Beat Detective in Cubase where you can edit a multi-mic track drum kit recording, quantize drums to the grid, extract a groove, templates, etc. All right, so let's say if I wanted to clean up, so, you know, anything that if I wanted to extract a groove, all you need to do is to, you know, double click. And if you go to hit points, once you find the hit points, you could come right over here and just say create groove from the particular recording. And then once you create groove, that will show up as your quantize preset that you could use. But let's say if I wanted to listen to drum recordings and I wanted to quantize multiple tracks of recording. So say I listen to the drums with a click track, everything that a drummer doesn't want you to do in a session when they're feeling insecure about their performance. So we can say maybe they rushed that a little bit. There's a snare fill coming up. So that wasn't quite as tight. The snare fill rushed the beat. So if I wanted to actually kind of quantize these to the grid, the first thing I would do is put them into a folder. And then what I want to do is just find kind of like maybe the kick, snare, and hi-hat, the main parts. And we want to find their hit points. So we could adjust kind of our hit point sensitivity. And the concept here is that we don't want tracks that are bleeding through to be, you know, based on hit points. I'm going to go to my snare and let's find the hit points for our snare. So we'll adjust our threshold accordingly. All right, so we see that this is probably like the hi-hat. Okay, that's our snare fill. And in this case, we start off with a hi-hat, so it's going to be kind of rhythmically significant. I will adjust the threshold for the hi-hat so it's not picking up like the kick tracks. And now that we have those main components where we have those hit points derived, I'm going to place these again into a folder, and we have this little icon that says group editing. So now when I come over here, if I do an edit to one of those, they'll be applied to all of the files. So I'm going to open up my quantize panel, and we'll see this in the upper right hand corner here. We'll see the quantize value, and then we could click on the E, and we're going to set a priority. So I can say, okay, my kick will have highest priority. I want snare top to have the second highest priority, and maybe hi-hat to have the third highest priority. Now, why we have to put these into a group edit is as the snare is hit, the snare mic, the snare is getting picked up not only in the snare mic, but in the kick mic, the overheads, the hi-hat mic, etc. So what I want to do is at this point, we'll just come right over here and just say, okay, we're going to slice. I could choose to do warp marking, but I'll just come over here and do a slice. And that will automatically create thousands of slices based on these priorities. Okay, so I see my quantize setting. So as we've created slices, now the problem is if we move just one of the elements, if I move the snare in this track, the snare in the hi-hat track and kick and overheads won't necessarily line up. So what I want to do is come over here. We're going to say, okay, my quantize value is set to 16th notes. And what I want to do is to quantize. And that's going to slightly shift all of the different elements so that they are in time. And at times you will have gaps. So what we could have Cubase do is automatically choose to crossfade between those gaps. And now we could come right over here and listen to the drums with the click. And that's really kind of all you'd have to do. And then as you wanted to listen to your different sources, you could just come right there. And that's how you could do kind of a multi-track drum quantizing. Okay, so I think we may have covered this in the previous live stream, but just in case it was missed, could you show how you can import audio files from Media Bay at lower volume? So let's do a new project. Okay, so let's say I'll come over here. Let's audition some drum loops. Okay, so right now I'll come over here and let's say have this drum loop. And if I set my preview volume lower, now I'm going to double click and that will add the particular drum sound. But as we do that, we notice that the volume level from the preview has been increased. So let's say if I want to import this drum loop and I had the preview volume louder, that the volume from the preview is automatically taken into account as we import the files. So if I come here and I want this super loud, I could just double click and we add that to the project, that we could see the different volume levels that were initially set during the preview. As we double click, that preview volume is carried over into the mixer channel volume. All right, so question. My DAW computer is not connected to the internet. How can I download updates, etc., to be able to make updates with my main PC being offline from the internet? So all you have to do is download it, and like when you do the download assistant, so let's say if we just come over here, let's go to the Steinberg download assistant. All you have to do is save it to a USB flash drive. So there's no problem with that, and you could actually just change the default download location. So let me see if I can do this without updating. So, as soon as we go to download a particular file, you could just say, okay, I want to change the install folder. Just put it on a USB flash drive and save it to there, copy that over to your main computer, and at that point install. So, and it's pretty straightforward. Okay, so we had a question with Groove Agent. So let's open up with a pattern. Okay, so let's say I have my pattern here. Okay, so the question is, when I imported a pattern, main 9 isolated acoustic agent, Cubase automatically imports a fill 7 as well, even though I haven't imported it. So let me see if I could, let's see if I could find that, if that's a particular pattern, the main 9. All right, so it says, when I imported a pattern, said main 9 isolated acoustic agent. So let's say if I just come over here, Cubase automatically imports a fill 7 as well, even though I haven't imported it. Okay, so it could be that maybe when we go to the patterns here, let's say if we come here to, so I'm not sure if you're dragging the pattern to the timeline or if it's coming from, all right, and let's see if we, or if it's just coming from here. So let's say if I drag a pattern, so I'm not sure if you're dragging the pattern from, let's say styles, and let's see if it's one of the styles here. So, if it's, let me know, so it seems like that's kind of dragging in just a one, like 4-bar pattern, but you could drag directly from the window, the style section, or directly from the pads, and that all seems to kind of work as expected. So, but let me know, if it's one particular kit that's doing it. Okay, so it says another question in response to the last live October 15th live stream. I'm still struggling with the tempo detection, audio warp. Is there a way of simultaneously warping all audio tracks at the same time rather than individually? You showed an example of audio warp, but it was only on one track. Can we do it on several tracks at once? It would save a lot of time. So yeah, let's show you how to do that. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to kind of change the tempo of a lot of audio files at once, let me just open up kind of a multi-track project. Okay, so let's say we have just a live recording that wasn't recorded to a click track. Okay, so, and if I turn on my click track, there's no correlation. So I'm gonna just come over here and go to the overhead drums, and I'm going to do my tempo detection from that. So I'll go to project and go to tempo detection. Okay, so now I have my tempo that's been extracted. So we see that we have fluctuating tempo, which is to be expected, especially like in a jazz piece. And what I want to do is to define kind of where the downbeat is. So it looks like it's going to be right here, measure 80. So at this point, I'll say, okay, our 4/4 will start right at that point. So let's say I wanted all of the tracks in this multi-track to follow like a steady tempo when the original tempo is fluctuating. So I'm going to select all of the events, go to my audio to advanced, and we'll choose set definition from tempo. So we could store this in a project or actually embed this in the metadata of the audio files. So once it kind of does this, and what it's doing is it's taking the tempo changes of every single beat and applied it to the particular audio files. So if I wanted this to play back steady, I could turn off my tempo track here and say, okay, I want this to be, 156. And now it's playing back a steady, perfect tempo, stretching each piece of audio for every single beat. Or I want it to be 144. So now it's perfectly steady, taking what was an audio file that was playing back at different fluctuating tempos and now making it perfectly steady. So that's how you could do that. All right, so we had a question, how can I make the name of the text show the full name of the send effect, or at least longer? Otherwise, it's very confusing to figure out which send effect automation lane is which. So I don't know of a way to change this, and just to kind of show this, if I come here to the send effects, I could see like when I come here and we select this, the name will get truncated. So I don't know of a way, and I've tried going through different like track control settings to see, sometimes you could go into track control settings and adjust the name width, but there isn't a selection for automation. So I'll mention that to the product team, but currently I don't know of a way of making this larger. I'll mention it to them and see if they have any ideas, or if it could be implemented or reflect the, we could extend the number of characters in this, but not in the automation lane, unfortunately. All right, and this was just a comment from the last live stream. It says, how do I create a layout in Cubase where I have to use eighth note triplets on the synth and the kick and let's say 30-second note and the kick 1 30-second notes? What should the layout be at 134 beats a minute? So if you're doing a new project, I think you would just kind of keep the layout the same. But let's say if I let's say our tempo is 134. And let's say, okay, I want this to be, let's add 2 instrument tracks, and I'll just make it go to nowhere to save time. Okay. And now when I go into, let's say, the key editors for these, so with drum tracks, you could probably just, change each of these individually, so that when we go to the drum track itself, if we go to the drum editor, like here, we could just change this so that the grid will be set up to 30-second notes. So you could kind of change the grid here, and as you zoom in, you could see 30-second notes on a grid for the drums. Now, let's say if we were doing for the bass part, and you wanted this to be 8th note triplets, you could change this grid to 8th note triplets. And there is one other little trick that you could do is, so let's say you want that to 30-second notes for this grid here. So let's say we have this to 30-second notes. I'm going to come over here to my key editor. So let's say I go to my click patterns. So let's say if I want this to be set to okay, so let's say I'm going to add a signature track. Let's see if this does a trick. And once we have a signature track, that we could come here and like I could say, okay, so I want this to be say 4 clicks. And then we could do it kind of as 6/8. And if we wanted to change that to 12, so this could be 8th note triplets. So at this point, I could say, go into our editor. You could right click here and choose use the metronome click pattern basis. So now we could just come over here, and the grid that we see for the editing tasks can actually be, and again, you right click here and use the metronome click pattern level for the grid emphasis. So as we do this, we could see that there was going to be 12 divisions there. So you could, when we go to our drum editor, we can choose to just have this be straight 30-second notes. So, if we wanted to have that in the drum editor, so we could have that be different. So 30-second notes, we could have the resolution set to, and when we come to like the bass part where you want 8th note triplets, you could change the grid resolution there. Okay, so I just see, I think it's from Jan. How do you set up everything to record what you hear? Classical question, but I don't see anything in Cubase index. So you may suggest use MIDI retrospective record, but I change VST instruments all the time, and also modifying wave files. I need to record everything I hear. So if we have a scenario like this where you want to record everything you hear, what you could do is, let's say, as you're working, you could have your whole template set up so that we could, so let's say, okay, I'm just kind of playing along. All right, so I have my patch here. So I'm going to send like everything in my project maybe out to a group, like a pre-master group. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to say, let's go to, so I'm going to say, let's add a group channel. So we'll do that. So now when I click on my Hallian Sonic SE, it's being routed to the group, and then I can add an audio track, and I'm going to set its input from the group we just created. And we'll just call this a catch. So now anytime, and I could just leave that always in record. I'll just come here and I'm just trying out ideas. So you go, oh, okay. All right, so I'll just turn off the click. So let's say, okay, I'm just trying out ideas. So as soon as I, come right over here and I just place this into record, anytime that it's gonna automatically record every little noodle that you do and just capture everything. So you say, okay, I'm just trying this, and you can hide it if you want to. And then every time that you record, that you just have that record enabled. And then at that point, you could just choose to kind of keep recording. So a lot of people may have just like a catch, almost like a print capture, call this a capture or catch as a group. And then you should be fine to just kind of record everything that you're hearing in your session. Okay, so a question. I know how to use the scissors tool plus alt to split a long note to make a separate note of specification length. Is working fine, but too heavy when doing a lot of notes or chords. I try to use logical editor, working fine to adjust length, but how to split? I can't find a scissor to split. Maybe you can show some ideas and hints how to use a logical editor, or maybe there's a command that I don't know. Okay, so let's come over here and I will add, let's say I'll just delete this and I'm going to add a chord track. Okay, so let's say I just have these set up as, we'll have these chords set up, and I'm just going to drag these down just to make some notes that we'll cut. Okay, so let's say I wanted to split a bunch of notes. So I came up with a way of doing this, maybe a bit unconventional, where, okay, we have long notes, and what I want to do is to split these long notes and let's say based on maybe eighth notes in an easy way. So I created a macro where we could just come over here and let me just open up the macro. So I called it advance and split MIDI. So we said transport nudge cursor right, and then there's a split at cursor function. So for under the edit menu. So now, and I think I assigned a keyboard shortcut to that. So right now I see I have one note that's held for the whole measure. So I'll move my song position here. And as I trigger this macro, what it's going to do is, so we say advance and split MIDI. So if I have this set to eighth notes, it will just automatically move to the next eighth note figure or next 16th note, and it will advance and automatically split. So I think if this is a keyboard shortcut that I did, so I'm just going to hold down a key command for the macro. And now it's going to take those long notes and kind of automatically just split. Now let's say, okay, now I want this to be eighth note triplets going from that point on. So I will just kind of come here and again, just, so we could choose the rhythmic value by the quantize. So now I could just kind of come over here. So let's say here I want this to be, quarter notes, or, I could now just say, come right there, hold down the keyboard shortcut to trigger that macro. And now as we play, we'll have 16ths, eighth note triplets. So you could do it just like that. So once again, the macro, just come over here, and once you have the keyboard, the cursor over something, again, it's just under Edit, Functions, and Split at Cursor. But to make the macro, just come over here and choose Transport Nudge Cursor to the right and Edit Split at Cursor. And then you could just hold down the key command, and that will just kind of trigger through. Okay, so we had a series of questions. See if we can get through these. How do I get the right-click toolbox back in Cubase 10.53? So really all you have to do if you want this, you could hold down the Command or Control key, but the preference, if you wanted to toggle back and forth between this, is just go to Preferences, and under Tools, you'll see Show Toolbox on right-click. So if I don't have that checked, when I right-click, I can see my toolbox here, or if I hold down Command or Option, I could just toggle between the two toolboxes. So again, it's Preferences, Tools, and then you could check or uncheck Show Toolbox on right-click. Okay, so I see this kind of no logical editor presets available, which I often used in Cubase SX. Tried copying, roaming folder, and no use. So if you're doing this from SX, it could be in a different location. So, it could be in your program files / and I'm not sure if it's SX on PC or Mac, but, it'll just be the presets. So generally they're going to be automatically updated, but like on the Mac platform, on Windows, you could go to, manually copy them. If you don't have that automatically, saved, or if you're not running as administrator, they may not show up, but, where you need to copy them is, once you come over here to your folder, you can do it from the location, but just go to the library. And then, like on the Mac, it'd be Library, and then under Preferences. So we'll just say, okay, so we'll go to Library, Preferences, and you'll see Cubase. And then you'll see Presets. And then you'll see just kind of all of your logical editor key commands there. If not, make sure that you are running your Cubase 11 as an administrator. So, and I also see no MIDI inserts presets as well. So that could be, the same thing. So it sounds like maybe make sure that your latest version of Cubase is maybe you're not running it as administrator. All right, so we have also, how can I send MIDI to an instrument open in the VST bay after recording it with a prior VST, and therefore trying out a variety of VSTs on the same MIDI part? So it could depend if you're doing it as an instrument track or, but one way of doing it is if you're starting it with a MIDI track is just come over here if you wanted to audition different sounds. So let's say, okay, I have this set up to be in Pad Shop, and I load up just a quick preset. So, anytime that I just want it to come here, you could just route it to, your different instruments. But another method that you could do is just going to if you're looking for auditioning, and you're starting from like a MIDI track, is you could go to your MIDI sends, and then at this point, we could send this to any destination that's open on a system. So I could say, okay, I just want to take this and send it to Pad Shop, or I want to send it to any others to quickly audition different sounds. So maybe check out the MIDI sends. All right, some questions on piano roll. How can I open the MIDI editor in a second view and screen as a default instead of having to send it to the other screen each time when closing? Okay, so all you have to do is, if you want this to, like when you double click, is just to come over here, and if you want that to always go to a different screen, go to editors and under preferences and choose double click opens in a new window. So now if I have this automatically set to go to a different screen, that's all, and I leave the editor window there. Next time I open an editor, it will automatically just pop over to the other screen. And then if you want to close, just hit the enter key. Okay, so we see getting different shapes on the draw tool. I used to have Alt doing that, I think. So if we have the draw tool here, and I have it, one is I could just click on the draw tool directly here. If the draw tool is currently active, you can just kind of hover over, hold down the right mouse button to keep the tool box open, and then just left click, and then you could switch between the different tools, the different drawing tools directly there. So that's all you have to do. Okay, so we just see, how do I get MIDI modifiers showing always in present? So once the MIDI modifiers, so it could be that the MIDI modifiers don't show up depending on what is currently active. So if I have, if I double click here, we could go, and I'll just toggle this preference back. So let's say we'll open this in the lower zone. So, if I double click on an event, let's say I go to the project window here, I could, if my MIDI modifiers are checked, that'll be showing. So I could have the inspector for the project of a MIDI track, or if I would double click, we can just see the inspector elements switch over to the MIDI editor. So if you wanted to now just go back to the other ones, just click somewhere else, and then you'll have your MIDI modifiers. Or if you just click, now we see all the editor functions for the key editor. So it depends what is selected. So if your MIDI modifiers disappear when you're here, just select, and then, it's because of the current active selection. Okay, so we kind of covered the next one just a couple minutes ago. All right, so we just see how to use the range selection on a part or audio of MIDI and apply some type of editing on that without having to do Shift plus X. So let's say if I have like an audio event. So let's say if I'm here, I'll just revert this quickly. All right, so if I just wanted to do this, and at this point I could just go to my audio, and let's just say I'll just reverse. So, you could just do selections based on the range. Sometimes it makes sense to do Shift plus X to, break the function, but you could just come over there and do edits with that. All right. So with that, we're just about out of time. I'll try to get to the rest of these questions on Friday's live stream. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions, and we'll do it again. And everyone, please check out Thursday's live stream on Nuendo, and everyone stay safe and healthy, and we'll see everyone on Friday at 1 p.m. Take care.